Guys, welcome to the I Love CVille Show. It's Jerry Miller. It's good to be with you on a gorgeous Wednesday across Charlottesville and Central Virginia. We are live on the I Love CVille Network across the Commonwealth, the country, and the world. Sally Hudson in the house. We will get to her in a matter of moments. What a campaign she ran. I mean, start to finish. She did well. She's still technically the candidate for the 57th district, but if you follow it like we follow it, got any common sense at all, we know that she's our representative. We're going to spotlight here on her on the program, and we're going to just talk life and see what's going on with Sally. This is her second rodeo on the program. She joined us in February, so we've had about 7 months in between interviews, which is too long for us here at I Love CVille. Let's thank one of our favorite clients. We're an advertising agency. One of our favorite clients is Interstate Pest and Service Companies. We've been working alongside this company for almost 7 years. It started in 1969. With the first generation. His name was Mr. Robert Wells. He used his personal truck and payphones in 1969 to build a company. Today, this business has almost 100 employees in a footprint that's Commonwealth-wide, and it's right here in Charlottesville, Virginia. We salute them for making our community a better place for all of us, just like we salute another one of our clients, Dr. Scott Wagner of Scott Wagner Chiropractic and Sports Medicine. Whether it's physical therapy, chiropractic care, sports medicine, Scott Wagner and his doctors are improving the quality of life of so many in our community, and we love working alongside his brand. Let's give some props and some love and some spotlight to Judah Wickower, our director. He's got the difficult job of keeping me on track. It's no easy task. He does a hell of a job with it. Judah, why don't we go to the studio cam, my friend, and welcome Sally Hudson to the show. Que pasa? How are you?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me here today.
Pleasure. I've been looking forward to this interview. Your schedule, a little bit busier now that the semester has started.
Yeah, so I'm back in the classroom 4 days a week, teaching in the mornings and doing the best that I can to make good use of this on-ramp we have between now and the election and then the legislative session in January.
Do your students know the other Sally Hudson?
They do. You know, I do my very best to keep my teaching hat and my political hat separate. But yeah, I mean, you know, they're public policy students, so they're politically engaged, so they definitely know that I have two jobs now.
Do you find that, so I was 2000 to 2004 at UVA, and while I was there, I definitely wasn't as engaged or following news and politics as I should. Do you find that today's student, with the ubiquitous nature of smartphones and social media, when I was there, pre all this, really, you find that they're more engaged in following what's going on?
Totally. I think social media has shortened the distance between people and our elected reps. I think that's great for the engagement of young folks. I mean, when I think about being in college, I wasn't voting in the primary for my state legislative candidates. So I think it's great that allows them to stay engaged. And I think that they get the stakes of our current political moment are really high, and I think that has also pulled a lot of them into it. I
totally agree. I mean, I feel like 2019, with what's going on in the White House, and we don't even have to go there, is just like totally getting such a younger voter base into the mix, because we feel like, and I'm saying we, like the younger base, us millennials, we feel like, look, it's our responsibility to help drive change and to dictate the future of our country. So the only way we can do that is to get involved.
Totally. And I think sometimes people forget, people like to rag on millennials. At this point, millennial just means adults under 40.
Right.
Like, millennials are between the ages of, at the bottom, and maybe 25 and 40. So we're like solidly, squarely adults who should be leaders in our community. And I think it is exactly that kind of disarray in Washington, which is pulling people to be more energized at the local level, because that's where they feel like they can actually have an impact. So I think it's great that we've got more young people engaged.
Rebecca Downey says, "Hi, Sally. I'm so glad to hear you on here." Gerard Smith ran for Board of Supervisors, giving you some props. He says, "Go, Sally, go." You're also getting some props from Ian Dixon, Nan Janey, Tim Ryan, Chris Turner, Tiffany Russum, Sonia Ha. We got a lot of DMs. They're still coming in that we're going to get to. I promise you we will get to them. All right, so let's go firsthand perspective. You come on the show in February. And when you came on the show in February, it was pretty much a two-horse race. It was you and the incumbent, David Toscano. After you'd come on the show, we had talked briefly, and I think David was tentatively up for this. He's come on the show a lot since, about maybe doing a debate between you and Toscano. A couple weeks after you come on the show, David announces that he's not going to continue and then Kathy Galvin gets in the mix. Let me throw this to you. Walk me through the emotions or what's going through your brain when you think, A, it's just me against David Toscano, who's a big-time guy, and then when you find out that Toscano's not going to run again.
Yeah, so it was really like we ran 3 separate races.
Right.
There was the first leg where we thought it was challenger and incumbent, and then there was this kind of dead period.
Right, when it was only you.
Yeah, because it took a couple, 3-4 weeks for folks to decide whether or not somebody else was going to run, and so that was sort of wandering in the wilderness. And then there was another solid 3 months or so where we had another clear 2-horse race. So there were really like 3 chapters in that campaign, and each of them was very different.
I can't imagine like what was going through your mind. Did you ever like have a chance to breathe a sigh of relief?
I think the great thing about local politics is that the strategy doesn't change.
Okay.
It's still just talk to as many voters as possible one-on-one. And so I think that that's really reassuring because, if you're running a big league campaign at the state or the national level, you're not out there knocking doors. But if you're running a local campaign, you can kind of just keep your head down and keep doing your thing and wait for other people to figure their self out.
I love it. Talk to us about the strategy. I mean, technically, you're not in office yet. We all know you are. Okay. How did you get this W, do you think?
I think that we were just meeting people where they were at and helping them understand the stakes of this moment that we're in Virginia politics. So just for context, here in 2019, every single seat in our General Assembly is up for election. Every seat in the House, every seat in the Senate. And Democrats are just 1 seat down in both chambers. So we're at 49-51 in the House and then 19-21 in the Senate. And here in Virginia, the party that's in power really dictates the whole agenda. And I think over the course of the summer especially, that became crystal clear to a lot of folks when they saw things like after the Virginia Beach shooting, we saw no movement in the General Assembly on any kind of common sense gun reform. And so, folks have come to really understand that with Republicans in the majority in Richmond, they get to dictate the agenda. So I think that talking to folks this spring about how much it mattered that Charlottesville and the greater Charlottesville community really had a voice in the room in that kind of climate, I think that really resonated with a lot of people. Like they understood that our seat has a job to do in Richmond.
I love it.
Are just we're one of the most innovative communities in Virginia, and so that means that we can be one of those innovative voices in the room that's saying, hey, we could do this differently.
Lindsay Neal says we are watching here in the office at Charlottesville Direct Primary Care.
Them.
Go Sally Hudson, go.
Do you know Lindsay and Rebecca?
I do not.
So they're docs.
Okay.
They just started a primary care practice
Cool.
that is a couple 3 blocks that way.
Okay.
And so they are now striking out on their own as entrepreneurs for the first time.
Nice. You're getting also props from, is it, am I saying the name right? Tiffany Price Rusum and Michael Shetley. They're giving you some love here. Give it a like and a share on any of the streams that you're watching. What impressed me about your campaign is you really did, and we're an advertising agency, so we try to relay these strategies to our clients, and you embodied them from start to finish. You did a great job of humanizing, localizing, and personalizing your brand. And you did it in a multifaceted approach. You did it through social media. You did it through the old school way of shoe leather and boots on the streets. You did it through having these sweet and engaging and really cool forums at Ix. You did it through having these cool parties that John Kluge threw was one example. You just really did a good job of making your brand and your campaign and platform approachable. And I think in a lot of ways that is the future of politics. These backroom dealings and this cronyism and the stodginess. That's not going to win, I don't think, moving forward anyway. Just talk to us anywhere you want to go with this topic.
I think that's spot on. I think there's an old school brand of politics where everybody wants to be in the room where it happens. That special cabal of people in power. And I think now people want more direct access to their government. And at my heart, I'm a government teacher. I teach economics, so I am constantly trying to make government more accessible to people. And so that's how we approach the campaign. I was in a position conversation of saying, hey, here's why what's going on in Richmond matters to you. Let's peel back the curtain a little bit so that you can see how you could engage. And it's really less about shipping me off to Richmond as some emissary on behalf of our community, and more about talking about how you can get involved so that this can be, a real community level engagement with our state reps.
What are the next steps? I mean, obviously you wait till, when do we wait, until November?
Yeah, November 5th is the election.
Okay, so you wait till November 5th. Probably going to have a little get-together with some friends on the 5th, I would imagine?
Yeah, we'll have a lot to keep our eye on because all of these other seats are still to be decided, and what we can get done as a community in Richmond totally hinges on how many other folks get elected with us.
So the 6th, how does Sally Hudson's life change on November 6th at, say, 8 a.m., 7 a.m. when you wake up?
Well, by then we'll know which party's going to be in the majority, and that's what dictates how everything plays out from then. So, if God willing, Democrats flip both chambers, we're going to be looking at how do we pull together as a caucus and start to determine leadership and an agenda. And so there's going to be a lot of important work to do between November and when the session kicks off in January.
Do we see that happening? I mean, if you were, you know numbers, if we were a betting person here, do you see that happening?
I do. If I were a betting woman, I think that Democrats have a real solid shot. I think everybody is taking nothing for granted. You run like you're 10 points down the whole way, but we're seeing energy like we don't typically see in these races. There was just a really great article, I think, in the Washington Post, where you had these older women, in their 70s, saying, we used to sit some of these elections out, but we'll never forget to vote again. And they're not just voting; they are rallying their neighbors in intense numbers. They're doing postcard parties, they're knocking doors, they're making calls. I think that people get now that politics is not a spectator sport.
Right.
This is how you have a voice, and so they're excited about it.
Slim Prescott from Disco Risque is watching, and he's giving you some props. So is Donna Casella. So is Tanya Ray. She's watching. Both do a lot with the Charlottesville Pavilion and the music scene. Talk to us about... here's a topic that came up on yesterday's show. We had Elliot Harding and we had Waylon Ross, and they're running for state senate. And we talked about this movement away, especially with the millennial and younger voter, from allegiance to party, especially at the local level, and more it's about people than party. A microcosm of this is what Bellamy Brown, the independent that's running for council in town, he's watching now, is going through. There was a front page story in the Daily Progress that pretty much depicted Mike Signer, he's a current city councilor, a donation he made through his PAC to Bellamy Brown's campaign of $250. Heather Hill, another current city councilor, with her husband made the donation to Bellamy Brown's campaign. The Democratic Party of Charlottesville reached out to both Mike and Heather, who've come on this show, and they said, hey, this is a no-no. It's the Democratic Party here. He's an independent. We don't do this here. And both were like, Mike even said this on the record, this is the first time in 2 years I've heard from the party. So where I'm going with this is the mindset is changing, especially with that 40 and under base. I vote for someone. I don't vote for a D or an R or a libertarian. I vote for the person. Talk to us about that mindset and how you're seeing that change, certainly at the local level. Are we seeing it change as we rise up the totem pole?
Yeah, I think people are hungry for a different framework. I think it's really frustrating when local politics gets hyper-partisan because it becomes about the blue team, red team battles in Washington, which have precious little to do with what's going on in our community at this level. I mean, we have really important soul-seeking to do inside the Democratic Party that is in no way reflected in that partisan split. So I think it's just another good example of why the hard party lines just aren't really well suited for having the kind of rich engagement we need at the local level.
Martin Kyle's giving you some props right now. Grace Australia in Richmond is giving you some love. Give it a like and a share on any of the 12 channels you're watching. Christopher Eagle, Real Estate 3, welcome to the program. Talk to us a little bit about the semester. How's it going?
It's great. It's great being back in the classroom. My students are awesome. They're super energizing. I mean, the best thing about teaching is that it keeps you on your toes and you're constantly learning. I mean, they ask great questions that, make you turn something on its head and look at it in a new way. So I love that, and I feel so incredibly fortunate that the university has been excited to work with me on moving on to a part-time role at UVA so that I can be in Richmond part-time. I mean, in some ways, I feel like I get to have my cake and eat it too. I mean, I get to do impactful policy work, and I get to do policy teaching at the same time. That's kind of the dream.
And one of the DMs we have coming in is about the dynamic of when you're in office and maintaining your professorship here. It's like, what is the schedule going to look like? Ms. Hudson is what his question is. That's a good question.
Yeah, so I get to pack all my teaching into the fall now.
Nice.
So I can serve in the spring. It's, one of the unfortunate realities of the way our state legislature works in Virginia is that there's only so many professions that can afford to split their job in half like that. So I teach, so I can teach in the fall and serve in the spring. But there's not a lot of jobs where you can just piece for 2 or 3 months and drop everything to go serve. And so that really limits who can even serve in the state legislature. It's why typically we've seen lawyers who bill by the hour and have pretty flexible schedules, or folks who are independently wealthy and don't really have to work. It's much harder if you're holding down another job, doctor or nurse or journalist or something, to just drop everything and go to Richmond. So I am very fortunate that I have one of the jobs that lets that happen. I intend to take full advantage of it, but it would be great to see us, rethink how we structure the legislature in a way that would let more people participate.
That is a natural springboard to a topic that's come up on this program with Mayor Walker. And Mayor Walker had made the comment that, look, we need to raise the salary and the payment of local officials, even state officials. I mean, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, delegate about $18,000 in compensation.
Yeah.
City council, $18K. Mayor, $20K. And she said on this show, this is a full-time job. So unless you have a flexible job, like you're saying, it's not a position that someone that's like lower class, middle class, or has to work a 9 to 6 can do. So like you said, she said this really caters to folks that are independently wealthy, retired, entrepreneurs, people that run the show at their business where they can leave their business and go do this. Do we think that like the compensation package at the delegate level, she thinks certainly at the local and the council level should be changed, which would then open up a larger spectrum of demographics of people that could run for these spots?
I think that's spot on, and I think it's important that we understand how government works when we don't pay our public officials appropriately. Because the low salary comes from a good place. They have in mind this really romantic vision of government where we are all citizen legislators and we do it part-time for the love of the work. And that's true. I mean, a lot of us do it that way. But what ends up happening is that because we don't really have a professional legislature that works year-round, what we end up with instead is a professional lobbying corps. We end up with a super professional, super powerful set of people who do this full time in well-paid gigs, and those are the lobbyists. And so it means that it's just not a fair fight when it comes time for the legislature to work through all of the bills that get put forth by the lobbying corps. I mean, I think it's really telling. There was a really interesting study that caught my eye this spring where they were trying to understand how much of the text of the bills that get passed are really being written by legislators and how much of it is just coming straight out of industry. And so now with modern language processing software, we can digitize all the text of the bills from all over the country, all the state chambers nationwide, and then run them through and identify the big blocks of text that are popping up
and how
in
much
the same
was
bills
it?
Over and over. And in Virginia, it's something like 40% of the text that we get is just like boilerplate lifted straight off of some some third special interest that's in the mix. I don't think it's an accident that
That's demoralizing.
It is. It's really frustrating, right? But you think about the math of it. Like, we serve in Richmond during the short years for 6 weeks.
Yeah, you're saying there's not enough time.
There's simply not enough time. You can't read a couple 3,000 bills in that time. And so, it's not that you just do less work. The same amount of work gets done. It just gets done by someone who's less accountable to the people.
I love it. I love it. We have some questions coming in, and this is a good question here, and you go anywhere you want with this. Sally, what are your thoughts on some campaign finance reform? We loved how you ran your campaign and not taking money from some big corporations, i.e. Dominion. Do we need to make changes moving forward so companies like Dominion don't have as much influence over our candidates?
Totally. I would be in strong support of a proposal that Governor Northam was supportive of on the campaign trail, which is banning corporate contributions entirely.
Really?
I'm an economist. I am very excited about being able to do consumer protection work in Richmond, making sure that consumers and small business owners are out there in the market on a fair playing field. And I think that, when corporations write the checks, they really run the show.
Elliot Harding, welcome to the program. Thank you for watching. Walter, is it Heineke? Heineke. Excellent level-headed analysis, Sally. I can't wait for her to represent me at the state. Walter, great comment right there. Give it a like, give it a share on any of the streams that you're watching. What were some of the common issues, some of the common needs, common items that were coming up when you were hitting the streets talking to people?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think a lot of us know this intuitively, but when you're really walking block by block every section of the district, it really hits home that Charlottesville has lots of little communities tucked inside of it. And so it really depends on where you're at. Obviously, we've got lots of folks who are deeply concerned about affordable housing. They're trying to make sure that they can continue to pay their rent or pay their mortgage, pay their taxes. We've got lots of folks that are hurting real hard still on healthcare and health insurance prices. Our community got rocked a couple years ago with the highest health insurance.
My family got rocked.
Yeah, you were one of them.
Oh my gosh. As an entrepreneur?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of our entrepreneurs are small business owners, folks who are trying to strike out on their own, folks who are between jobs, folks who want to leave a job that's not right for them and go on and do something else. They were paying $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a month for health insurance. So a lot of folks want to talk about healthcare. We've got a lot of folks here who are deeply concerned about our warming planet and want representatives who are going to have a serious climate change agenda. And then I think we've got a lot of folks who see all of that urgency and so little action in government, and so they care a lot about democracy reform itself.
How do we make sure we're not in this healthcare predicament again?
Yeah.
Well, besides having multiple options on the marketplace, competition breeds competitive pricing.
True.
At one point, we had one option, and that's when the rates skyrocketed. And then that's when self-employed small business owners like myself and my family, my wife and my son, were like, Jesus, this is ridiculous. We were paying essentially for catastrophic as opposed to actually having health care. Okay, you know what I mean? Obviously, you know what I mean. How do we make sure this doesn't happen again?
I think it's important that we understand that healthcare is a very different market than, say, hamburgers. It just doesn't naturally tend toward that perfect competition equilibrium. It is a market plagued by all of the classic market failures that economists will tell you will drive you to exactly that outcome where you wind up with a super concentrated market with a monopolist. So what do we do about that? Well, we've got tools for correcting market failures. One of them is public intervention. And so the government can get into that market and offer a public health insurance option so that there is always another plan in the mix competing with the private sector options. We saw a public option on the table when the Affordable Care Act was first being debated. It didn't make it through Congress. And so I think a lot of innovative states are starting to look at a public option at the state level. And that was something that I ran on that I would really love to work on in Richmond, because I think we can't ever put ourselves in that position again. And I think that at a time where we're seeing DC still so gridlocked, we're not going to see concrete solutions out of them necessarily anytime soon. That's no excuse for states not to step up in the interim and make sure we get everybody covered.
You'll appreciate this. Lindsay Neal says, how we solve this is monthly membership at Charlottesville Direct Primary Care. Lindsay, thank you for leaving that comment on the feed. Give it a like and a share on any of the streams you're watching. A lot of DMs we're going to get to. A lot of these comments we will get to here in a matter of moments, guys. We talk about this a lot on the show. Charlottesville is roughly 10.27 square miles. Okay, Charlottesville is very quickly, I've been here since 2000, is very quickly getting very, very, very expensive to live. My wife worked for a hedge fund in the city, in New York City, called Blackstone. And when she moved, when I somehow persuaded her to leave this job to come down here and start this family, she was shocked after spending all this time in the city with how expensive everything was in Charlottesville. Let's start with an open-ended question. I'm seeing our community that I dearly, dearly love evolving into this bastion of wealthy, deep-pocketed individuals who can afford the $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 homes, who could afford the meals, could afford the real estate, et cetera, et cetera. That's not what I want. That's not a community I want my son to grow up in. I want my son to grow up in a diverse, well-rounded, perspective community. I'm fearful that Charlottesville is going to evolve into this white, rich community a la a San Francisco or a Seattle. Why don't we start with that, and then I'll ask you some specifics.
Yeah, well, this is a question that's near and dear to my heart because as an economist, I'm a labor economist. That's like the particular stripe of it that I focus on. And I think a lot of it has to do with which kinds of jobs we invest in. Obviously, we have some industries that naturally find their home here, particularly because of the university.
Right.
Because the tech sector, the energy sector, healthcare, that are going to be some of those higher income jobs and are going to naturally continue to pull in employees from outside of our community and really heat up wages. And I think that it's important that if we want to maintain an economically diverse community, that we continue to invest in jobs throughout the income spectrum. Some of that is work that we can step up and do in Richmond. So for example, I had a really good conversation a few weeks back with the folks at the Arc of the Piedmont.
Nice.
To do
Brian Harris?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Critical work in our community.
Yes.
Supporting our residents with developmental challenges.
Right.
And they're right now, feeling the heat of rising wages in healthcare because a lot of their wages are dictated by the state.
Right.
By the Medicaid reimbursement rates. And so they would love to be able to pay the professionals that they employ for the hard work that they're doing, but they can't because the state doesn't pay them enough for the services they provide. So that's it for me is a really exciting opportunity to talk about how Richmond can step up and say, we as a state, as the Commonwealth of Virginia, want to make sure that this is a place that can be a safe home for everybody. Part of that means making sure that we're serving folks with developmental disabilities well. That means that we're supporting the professionals who take care of those people that we love, and that means paying them like the professionals that they are.
It's interesting because let's take, and we'll get into more specifics on this topic, and you're getting props from a lot of people right now. Buzz Becker, thanks for having Sally on. Jerry, we're so lucky to have her as our next delegate. That's from Buzz Becker. Lisa Torres, love and respect Sally Hudson so much. Ray Cadell just shared the feed. Scott Ratcliffe just shared the feed. Grace shared the feed in Richmond. Folks in D.C., Richmond, and Charlotte, South Carolina, and Pennsylvania are watching right now. Joffrey Woodruff, right across the street, he owns the QIM hedge fund. He is the gentleman and visionary that purchased the Charlottesville Ice Park, knocked it down, redeveloping it into Code, the center of developing entrepreneurs. He's going to build this 21st century type of innovative epicenter, which is essentially going to be a portfolio that houses his companies. Where I'm going with this is he donated $120 to $125 million to UVA for a data science school. Data science is exactly what he does at QIM. So he's building, for a sports analogy, let's go with the sports analogy, he's building a farm system at UVA, and then he's going to cherry pick the best of the best from that farm system and create essentially a path to the major leagues at QIM, which is brilliant from a businessman standpoint. From a Charlottesville citizen standpoint who tries to be an ambassador for the community, I love it as a businessman because it's going to create more money in the economy for our advertising agency to potentially have success with. I'm concerned with it as someone who's an ambassador for the community because it's only going to create more deep-pocketed individuals living in this community, only going to take us closer and closer and closer to that San Francisco mindset. What do you think the role is? And this may be the toughest question I ask for you here. What do you think the role is for an entity like UVA in our community? We don't want it to turn into the city of UVA, but we certainly understand that UVA has a huge role, more so than any entity and any person in this community. What is the University of Virginia's role in Charlottesville? What should it be?
Yeah, well, the UVA touches our community in so many different ways. And so I think it's all about making sure that the residents of Charlottesville who call this community home are first in line for the benefits that all of that activity conveys. So it's making sure that we're preparing our Charlottesville public school students well so that they can go off to their state flagship university. It's making sure that we are connecting local residents here with opportunities to take advantage of not just working for those companies that will be incubating there, but starting them. I mean, we have access to small business loans, so that folks who have an idea for how they can dial something up can be part of the mix too. So I think at every step, it's about making sure that we connect local residents with all those opportunities and make sure that they're not just about attracting entrepreneurial tourism from outside of where we live here. One of the people who I think is doing some of the most exciting work around that about making sure we're building those bridges is Rich Schuyler at PVCC.
Yeah.
I mean, he thinks so hard about how do we actually provide all the wraparound supports so that we can help people make that jump from some kind of career that they're in right now that may not be giving them all the opportunities they want, get the credentials that they need to step up into some of those more high-tech and high-demand industries.
Were you surprised with the grief that Joffrey caught for that donation to UVA? And the second part of the question was, should the donation have been able to be used for what he wanted, or should it have been used and spread and allocated across the board?
It's an interesting question. You know, I wasn't in on the inside of that process, so I don't want to get too far out over my skis. I do think it's critical. You know, I'm an economist. I teach statistics courses. I think it's very important that we be developing good curricula around the data science boom, and would love to continue to be a part of that at UVA. So I understand why UVA is hungry to set up an institute like that, and I think that it's now on all of us to make sure that we design a curriculum that educates people to be responsible citizens in society with all of those tools. Because what makes me really nervous as a teacher is when we help people tech up, but we don't give them all of the history and the sociology and the economics and the context that they need to understand the real implications of how those tools get used in the real world. So that work is going to be done whether we like it or not.
Right.
At this point. Like, folks are going to be off using data. It's our job to make sure they're doing it in a responsible way.
Good answer right there. Buzz says when you get a chance to hear Sally speak, you take it and you change your schedule. You're going to love some of these other comments that are coming in. Lisa Torres giving you more props right now. Amanda Crombie, Sally Rocks, Catherine Laughlin. Long. Can't wait for Sally to take office. Ian Dixon, Sally, and freshman representatives like her are going to shake Richmond up next week or next year. Give it a like and a share on any of the streams that you're watching. Rick Henderson just shared the feed in Washington, D.C. Everett Anderson's watching the program right now. Sandy Fuel, the automotive titan, is watching over at Colonial. Give it a like and a share anywhere you're watching. The affordable housing is constantly in the news. And we have had so many folks, whether it's David Toscano, Kathy Galvin, yourself, all the folks running for council. We're reaching out to Rob Bell. We're efforting Terry McCullough on the program. We're trading emails about that. And affordable housing is just like literally, it seems like it's like affordable housing, the economy, what's going on in the White House, of course. These are what everyone's talking about. I want to go down the affordable housing rule. I threw this question to Lloyd Snook, and he made an interesting comment. And he essentially said, look, if we're going to solve the affordable housing crisis in Charlottesville, it's not going to be solved overnight. Where it can be solved the fastest is potentially in Albemarle County, because Albemarle County has the most land that can be developed into affordable housing. In the city of Charlottesville, most of the property that's in the city of Charlottesville, 10.27 square miles, is in good condition. So it's going to be hard-pressed for us to knock down and tear down good condition real estate and then build affordable apartments there. And really the only way we can develop in Charlottesville is we go up, right? So he's like, let's focus on Albemarle County. He caught some flack for that, because it was then manipulated, his commentary, into saying, what, are we going to bust the poor people out into the county and they can't live in the city of Charlottesville? In retrospect, he admitted he could have positioned it a little bit better, but I think the essence of what he was trying to say is, look, if we're going to solve this problem quickly, it's got to be in the county and leveraging their open real estate, because Charlottesville, what are we going to do? We're not going to knock down the flats. We're not going to knock down the Lewis and Clark condos right there at the top of the mall. I mean, let's start opening on that question here. How do you think we even solve this dilemma?
So one of the people who I think offers a really interesting perspective on this question is Matthew Gillikin. Do you follow him on Twitter?
I love him. He's one of my good friends. We constantly text message. He's amazing, right?
He's amazing.
Yeah.
Sits on the Planning Commission.
Well, he wants to be. He's not
quite
quite yet.
Oh, that's it's funny. I think of him as such an active voice. I actually had mentally put him on the Planning Commission.
Yeah.
And he is always out and about with his kids, walking around Charlottesville, and takes these great photo tours of the city and says of like open vacant lots, and is like, wherever could we build in Charlottesville?
That's true.
And he's like
does
constantly
parking lots.
He's cataloging all of these places where it's like this could be developable land. land. So, I think it's important that we not take any of those opportunities for granted. I think it's important that we recognize exactly how our zoning and the designs that we permit affect whether or not we get a lot of housing out of a place or we just get a lot more parking spots. I think it's really interesting to look at the redesign of Friendship Court, for example. They're taking that really seriously about how much of that usable land sometimes gets eaten for parking. So I think that this is definitely a problem begging for a bunch of yes and solutions. It's going to be not one silver bullet, but a lot of different tacks. And I just don't want us to take for granted that there is space in Charlottesville to develop as well.
Okay, so you're saying the first step then is to, and you're totally right. I mean, he takes pictures of like parking lots all over town. He's like, this clearly could be housing right here. This clearly can be affordable housing. Do you think that's the first step?
I think it's the first of many steps. I mean, this has got to be, multiple trains in parallel. And, it's interesting, the more that you have an opportunity to survey lots of different people about this, you get different perspectives about where the hangups are. I had a really good sit down with some of the area realtors a few weeks back where they were talking about how their problem is not necessarily space constraints. It's the timeline at which permitting processes proceed and whether or not they can predict that. Because sometimes if there are hangups in the process of moving a project through the development stages, then they get caught, holding the ball when something should be moving, and they, for them, that time is money. So I think that there's a whole lot of things that we can do. Some of it's not super sexy policy. Some of it's that nuts and bolts of bureaucracy. How do we make sure that all the trains are running on time so that we can keep projects moving? But it's got to be a multi-pronged strategy.
You're gonna love this. He's listening. I just heard what she said. Love her. I'm honored. Gilligan. Yeah, Matthew.
He's fantastic.
He's fantastic, right?
Yeah.
That open source Google Doc that he has pinned to the top of his Twitter account,
right.
I mean, that is ridiculously valuable.
And that is the best of Charlottesville's community engagement right there. Like when we're talking about how people want to shorten the distance between government officials and citizens, it's because the citizens are so incredibly talented. Like we would be stupid not to take advantage of all of the energy in our community that can be put to such good use. So in some ways, I think it is not the job of the elected official to represent folks, but more to be the funnel for all of that energy, to be the teacher who can help people understand how the particular facet of government that they work in functions, so that they can take advantage of all of the opportunities and the rules of the road. But it's really about being more like the shepherd for all of that talent.
A lot of questions coming in. Michael Payne's watching. Bellamy Brown's watching right now. Charlottesville City Hall, multiple folks from Charlottesville City Hall watching right now. All right, let's get to transportation. We did an analysis on I Love CVille on how the lack of robust transportation in the community is negatively impacting affordable housing in Charlottesville. And you know this as well as anybody. Basically, a snapshot of it is, if we don't have more robust transportation, our most impoverished citizens are moving out to the outer counties to find affordable housing. Instead of getting a $1,300 a month ramshackle 2-bedroom in the city, they can get a $700 a month 4-bedroom in, say, Fluvanna or Louisa. Mm-hmm. And the thinking is like, all right, that's $600 less a month. However, when they get in their vehicles and they commute from Fluvanna, Louisa to the epicenter of employment, which is Charlottesville, you got the wear and tear of the car, you got the fuel costs, you're pretty much going to lose that margin in transportation. Even worse, the opportunity cost of the time in the vehicle to and from. Our most precious commodity in life undoubtedly is our time. Our time is how we could potentially get out of a tough financial situation, make more money, applying to other jobs, interviewing, climb the ladder. It's this like terrible snowball effect.
And the carbon cost to the climate.
Right, I didn't even get to that. And the carbon cost to the climate, this terrible snowball effect. So I guess where I'm going with this is, and we'll start open-ended, if the transportation, and I'm not doing this to knock CAT. I'm not knocking Charlottesville-Almore transit system. I'm not doing that. I'm just like having a conversation with someone that can make a difference. Okay? If the transportation system is more robust, and Eric Williamson says, Sally, can you address mass transportation and reducing the number of cars on the roads? I'm going to add another layer to that. Say, if it's more robust and more reliable and more timely, that right there is a key element that can impact affordable housing in our community. throw all that to you.
So I just want to affirm all of that, which is that all of these issues are interrelated and that we've got to solve our transit and our housing challenges at the same time. I think we also all know that means we've got to get regional about it because the community doesn't stop at the city limits. And so I think a lot of the progress is to be made about how do we have the institutions that can handle that kind of regional transit. Right now, Jaunt is the organization that's in the position to be the most flexible.
Ooh, I love this.
Right?
They just opened in Crozet,
right,
around Crozet.
So they've got the Crozet Connect coming back and forth. They go down to Buckingham. I mean, they have people coming. Yeah, they have a bus coming back and forth from Buckingham, a lot of folks who work in the hospital system. And so I think that that's where you get down to the real nitty-gritty of how government functions. You know, where is the footprint of different institutions, the city, the county, the region, the Thomas Jefferson Planning District.
Yeah.
And so it's about how do we, put all of those pieces in a position so that we can actually have a regional transit system.
Sure.
Again, this is a kind of thing where also Richmond can step up and be more supportive and to recognize that there is a state role for regional transit challenges and to put more fiscal support behind that as well.
I would love, and I'm just going to, this is the businessman in me talking here. I would love to see, in some ways, public transportation privatized in some capacity. Or another option is maybe the University of Virginia becomes the ringleader for transportation. And whether it's a lost leader for them or whether it's their way, businessman private or UVA's way of giving back to the community, whatever it may be, the resources just don't seem to be there from the local municipality level to make transportation more robust and reliable. Lloyd has made the point on this program, if we can get consistent bus routes and transportation routes, then density will grow around these routes. A perfect example of this, I'll get back to my wife in New York City. When she was picking where she was living, say Upper East Side, she was doing this, I'm a block from the subway. I'm a block away from getting on the subway to then be able to go to work at Blackstone. So if we're able to get transportation more reliable and more consistent, I think the density would potentially follow.
I think that's true, and I think that's why it's so important that the state be part of the solution, because one of the reasons why there's limited revenue at the local level is that the local governments only have so many taxation tools in their kit, and the ones they have are the most distortionary.
You're talking about
Meals
real
tax,
estate,
property tax,
tourism.
Right, exactly. So
it works against the people in the community.
But the state is in a position to use less distortionary taxes, like an income tax. And when I say distortionary, I mean that they don't have the same bite on economic activity because they don't hit consumers as hard. In Virginia right now, we do not have the kind of progressive tax schedule that would allow us to invest funds from higher income folks into those bigger league infrastructure investments. So our top tax bracket tops out at about 18 grand. So we tax millionaires and minimum wage earners at the same rate. Some folks think that's fair. Some folks think that a flat tax is fair. I think it's reasonable to ask higher income folks to put more into public services because they draw on them more. If you're a big employer, then you benefit from having a robust public transit system because your workers can use it, and it becomes something that you use to attract folks to come work in your industry or for your company. And so I don't think it's too much to ask both corporations and higher income individuals to pay a higher marginal tax rate through the state so that that money can come back into the public infrastructure that they rely on to make the engines of industry turn.
I love that answer. Let's get to some of the comments coming in, and there are a lot of them. I don't think I'm going to be able to get to all these because I'm going to be mindful of her most precious commodity, her time. We're already 47 minutes in. Abby Guskin, this is props for you. She says, Sally Hudson is a beautiful rock star. I'm looking forward to her taking on Richmond. She's a change maker right there. Love, 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 love her. Heart emoji.
I can hear Abby's voice in that. That's Abby to a T.
This is a question for you that's a good one. Is it Alex Soltes? Okay, he says, hi, Sally. What's the plan for local RCV legislation coming up next GA session?
So RCV is ranked choice voting, and that is another project that's near and dear to my heart. It's an election reform that is picking up steam all across the country. Real quick, for those who aren't familiar, ranked choice voting is a small change to ballots that can make a really big difference for democracy and break down.
It's a no-brainer.
Yeah, it's total no-brainer.
It's a no-brainer.
On a ranked choice ballot, you don't just vote for one candidate. You get to rank the candidates from most to least favorite. So you say, here's my first choice, here's my second choice, here's my third. Those of us here in Charlottesville understand intrinsically why we need ranked choice voting, because ranked choice eliminates the temptation to single shot. In a traditional election, like the kind we have here in CVille for our city council, if there's multiple seats open...
3 in November. Yeah.
You've got 3 votes, and you face this trade-off. You can vote for the 3 candidates you really like most, but every vote you use dilutes the power of your votes, because you might rather concentrate all your power in one single vote, single shot for the candidate you like most, because you want to make sure they get on council. So ranked choice voting eliminates that tension. You just get to say, here's my top 3, here's the order in which I like them. And then when all the ballots are cast, we conduct an instant runoff to whittle down the candidates to the ones who have the most votes in order. So
it's like the Associated Press top 25 college football ranking.
It's
the same thing.
It's totally. It's like people do this naturally. It's like you walk in.
What are top 5 restaurants you want to go to?
Exactly. It's like if you were choosing
our favorite beers.
Totally. Favorite beers, favorite ice creams.
Yeah.
It's totally like that. I mean, it's like if you're trying to order dessert at a diner and you say, hey, I'd like a slice of peach pie, and the waiter says, oh shoot, we just sold the last one. Well, you go, okay, that's
my number
cool.
2.
Like, I'd like apple. That's my backup. It just means you have a first choice, and if you don't, if your first choice can't win, you get a backup. So cities all over the country have been hopping on the ranked choice train. Minneapolis, St. Paul, Oakland, San Francisco, Santa Fe, Memphis. Lots of places have loved it as a way of engaging more voters and more candidates in their elections. The big shift for ranked choice came in the last couple years when Maine went statewide with ranked choice. So they elected their governor, their senators, their U.S. congressmen and women with ranked choice voting, and in 2020, they're going to use it for the presidential. So that has made a huge precedent for more people to pay attention to ranked choice voting all over the country. So Alex's question was, what is the plan for here in Virginia? And like in all other states, the path to ranked choice voting here in Virginia starts at the local level. Folks want to try it in a local context where they can really see the benefits, like with a city council race, where it's super clear why you'd want to do it. And so one of the pieces of legislation that I plan to carry in Richmond, if I'm elected in November, is a ranked choice voting local option bill. So a bill that would authorize Virginia cities and counties to use ranked choice voting in their county board races, city councils, school boards. That way you can have some communities like Charlottesville who might be game to give it a try, be those initial pilot communities.
Love that.
See how it goes, see if you like it, and if we have a good experience, then maybe build on it and take it to another level from there. That's how Maine got there. In Maine, they've been using ranked choice to elect their mayor in Portland for many years. They really loved it, and so they said, hey, more Mainers would like to use this, and we like to use it in all of our elections.
I love it. It's common sense.
It's super common sense. I mean, you naturally rank things in your head, and the beauty of it, I think, is that we all are tired of elections that are with us or against us, that are like for or anti. But if you've got an election system that only lets you cast one vote, then you're naturally going to pit people against each other. If we give ourselves a ballot that lets us say, hey, my thoughts on this are a little more nuanced than just pro or con, then we get to hear those voices come through loud and clear in our elections.
We have a lot of questions coming in here. You're very well liked. We have 2 that have requested anonymity, and I'm happy to oblige. I will get to this one that came in via Facebook Messenger, which is a good one. Let me get to this one that just got texted to me. This may be the toughest question I'm asking you here. Jerry, I'm watching in City Hall along with a number of other colleagues. Please do not use my name. I'm curious of Sally's opinion or take on big donations from a single person. He says Sally was I can't read this word. Sally was springboarded, I think it's misspelled, was springboarded by a big-time donation of $100,000. Do we think we need to adjust that moving forward and limit the capacity of donations, especially at elections at the local or delegate level?
Totally. So I'm a big proponent of comprehensive campaign finance reform, and I think you have to tackle it all at once, because otherwise there's a tendency to plug one hole and to have the money pop up somewhere else. So in the same way that I think that we should cap corporate contributions or eliminate corporate contributions all entirely, I'm also supportive of capping individual contributions. I think that it's important that folks understand that those contributions from a single donor, which didn't happen all at once, came in over time.
Yeah,
as
it was
that donor,
$100K from Sonia Smith.
over time.
Yeah.
Over time. As she saw that we were doing good work with her initial investment, she gave more. That was about making a dent in a challenge against an incumbent sitting on several $100,000 from corporate sources, from big tobacco and payday lenders and health insurance companies, the very, powers that be that I think it's very important for us to go serve in Richmond and confront. So had that not been the stakes, had I not been challenging an incumbent that was sitting on all the money from those sources, I don't think she would have offered, nor would I have accepted that donation. So it was sort of a real politic of the race as it stood. But absolutely, I think that we have to tackle campaign finance reform en masse, because if you just try to plug one of the holes, then somebody complains like, okay, well, that's not fair. That's where I get my money, but you get your money over here. We have to come together and sort of collectively disarm.
I respect you and how you handled that comment right there. You handled that very, very well. Two more questions coming in that I think are very applicable. Hey, Jerry, can I ask Sally a question anonymously if you have time? Sure, I have time. Here's the question. Recently, a proclaimed progressive Albemarle County Board of Supervisor voiced concerns related to a land use application that was contrary to increasing affordable housing and established good planning practices because not in my backyards showed up in large numbers. Many candidates claim to be progressive, but how do we know Sally will stick to her principles in the face of opposition? Will Sally show leadership and pressure other elected officials to do the same? Good question.
So I'm not completely sure about which example, which special use permit might the question be here, but I do take very seriously that an elected official is more than the sum of their votes. I get very frustrated when elected leaders say, well, I don't get a vote on that, so I don't have a voice. I think that people are counting on you to be an engaged member of the community, to use your platform where it's appropriate. So, if I'm someone who believes, as I do, that I care about progressive economic reform, that, when that does come down to things that might not be directly in my wheelhouse as a member of the House of Delegates, I'm very happy to engage as one of the leaders in our community more broadly to talk about, what's best for all of us. I also take very seriously that because of the way the district lines are cut, that our community doesn't stop at the district boundaries either. My district goes up to the Ravenna, out down toward Kale Elementary, but there's a whole lot of folks to the east and west of Charlottesville proper who are part of the broader CVille community who aren't technically in the 57th, and my ear is open to them as well. Ann
Malik, Board of Supervisors, watching right now. Her opponent, Steve Harvey, also on the stream. Dan Pettit, thank you for joining us. Nicole Scrow, Lee Alter, Josh Fonner, Amanda Traplowski. We got Albemarle County's attorney watching right now. Give it a like and a share on any of the streams you're watching. This comment comes in, says the Dillon Rule is one of the worst things possible for Charlottesville, Virginia, and is limiting what we can do with our city. Sally, talk to us about the Dillon Rule and what we need to do to get away from this white elephant.
So I think the most important thing to know about the Dillon Rule is that we're not the only ones who are frustrated. There is a movement growing all across the country. It
originated in Iowa, right?
The Dillon Rule originated in Iowa, yes.
And they've distanced themselves from the Dillon Rule.
They ditched the Dillon Rule.
Yeah.
So a couple years ago, Iowa was celebrating the 50th anniversary of the return to home rule.
Really?
Yeah. So, the originators took it back. But I actually had occasion just last week to talk with a group of lawyers nationwide that are helping to support state legislators think comprehensively about home rule reform, because they have noticed the rise in what we call local preemption laws all over the country. A local preemption law is when the state steps in and says, you cities, you don't have the right to do that. You don't have the right to regulate whether there are toxic products that get sold in your city limits. You don't have the right to regulate whether you have control over your statutes or your wages or your licensing, all these kinds of things. And so I think it's exciting to see that infrastructure build up, because it means it's no longer about just Charlottesville kind of complaining about it from the fringes. We have a lot of institutional support to do it well. There was actually a conference at UVA Law just this last weekend that was focused squarely on local preemption and what we can do to empower cities. And I think it's so crucial for our community because as one of the most innovative communities in Virginia, we're always going to want to tinker and experiment with new ways of doing things, and the Dillon Rule holds us back.
Guys, I am not going to be able to get to all these questions and comments that are coming in. I'm going to try to cherry pick 3 or 4 more. 56 minutes into the program. Talk to us a little bit about, you know what, why don't I get to this one? This is from Walter. Little thing, but could we change our legislation that governs boards of visitors to read from include an elected faculty representative? Also, can we include a requirement for public comment at all BOV meetings statewide? I'm not sure I get your question so much, Walter. Why don't we go to the next one here? Let's talk about, at the local level, this question's coming in about having more than 2 parties in the mix. We're seeing Bellamy Round run as an independent. We know Mayor Walker won as an independent. Rob Schilling, I believe in 2004, 2006, 2002 it may have been, was the last Republican to win a spot on city council. The 2-party system seems to be flawed. This is essentially what this question is about. Jerry, I'm a libertarian. I would love to see a third party, maybe a 4th party into the mix. Can you bring up with Ms. Hudson what she thinks about having a 2-party system and how it can improve?
So I think that if you have an appetite for more political parties, then you're exactly the kind of person who should get on the ranked choice train, because we need ballots that allow us to express how we feel about multiple parties, and right now we don't have that. And so you think about all of the elections where the winner has escaped with less than half the vote because there was a 3rd or a 4th party candidate that split the vote between the top 2. And so you end up getting someone that really a minority of voters chose because there wasn't really a good way for people to support the 3rd party candidate while still having a say in the head-to-head between those top 2. So if you're excited about 3rd and 4th party voices, get excited about ranked choice, because that is the practical election reform that would give more power to those.
Chris Stevenson says, Jerry, I voted for Sally. She's fantastic. She's just what we need. Please tell her thank you and to keep the job that she's doing going in the right direction. She also wants to know that what your plans are for moving forward after being a delegate. I mean, you're ambitious. You have goals. Would you like to continue to climb the political ladder?
I would not. I would like to keep being a delegate.
Yeah?
I would like to be a state
Legit?
legislator, and I would like to be a good one.
Yeah.
It's understanding why. I think you have to know a little bit more about where I grew up. I grew up in Nebraska mostly. We moved around a lot growing up, but when I was in high school, and I think really kind of coming into my own, I was in Nebraska, and that's a place that is often overlooked by Washington and takes state government really seriously. We have a unicameral legislature. We have one house. So everybody's got one state senator, and they all serve in one house together. And it's actually a really functioning body. We have totally nonpartisan elections. And so you don't even get to see on a ballot whether somebody's a D or an R. And so I think growing up in that environment, I had just a lot of respect and admiration for state government. And so as I was becoming an economist, I was most excited about working with states. I was working on projects with the state government back home in Massachusetts and California and Colorado, all over the place. So I have always been someone who's been most interested in state government. I thought for the longest time that was going to mean doing that kind of backroom wonky stuff. The kind of nitty-gritty that makes government go round. But as I got more engaged here in Virginia and felt like we could have a more reform-oriented voice in Richmond, decided to step into the political arena. But I've never been someone who's felt any kind of pull to D.C. It's just not where my heart is.
Lewis Combs. Sally, you have an impressive grasp of an array of topics. I believe you are a quality candidate, and I am pulling for you tremendously. Welcome to the show, James Watson, Ronnie. Welcome to the program, Todd Proctor, Janet Knight. A lot of people watching. All right, why don't we wind down with this here? Do you, and this is just going to be 2 people at a bar having a good time talking about Sally Hudson here. Any concerns at all when Sally goes to Richmond? And you got like this old boys club, right? Of like how you're going to be received and welcome. You think about stuff like that?
I'm pretty used to being the only woman in the room. Mm-hmm. because I'm a woman in math.
Right.
So
We're economists.
You can't get a worse gender ratio than the male-female split in math.
Yeah.
So as bad as it is in politics, I'm pretty used to it. You know, it's funny. I was grabbing coffee with somebody the other day who's a long-standing lobbyist in Richmond, has kind of been around the block a handful of times, and somebody had encouraged us to sit down together. So I said, sure, I'm always interested in meeting new people. And I asked him exactly that question, you know, is it really how everybody says, you know, how does, you know, that kind of climate, particularly of the good old boys and the booze and that kind of wheeling and dealing.
You get the impression of like bourbon and cigars.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it really is sometimes a smoke-filled room. And he said, you know, you're just going to have to get used to it. And I said, no, sir, I don't think I will. Because I think that there are a lot of new voices in Richmond. I'm not going to be alone. We elected 11 new women in the last cycle. We're going to elect some more this time around. And I think as we get those new voices in the room, the culture of it is going to change as well. I'm not so naive as to think it's going to change overnight. Right. But there, you know, people are starting to build experience and power of their own, and they're saying, hey, you know, we don't need to do business the old way. We need to do it in a way that actually makes everybody feel, you know, respected and included in the process. And so I think that we're going to see that culture shift, and it starts with getting different kinds of people in the seats.
Lisa Davis says, Jerry, I'm watching from Richmond. Sally Hudson is going to lead a change in candidates that represent the Commonwealth that better reflect who we are as voters and as people who love the Commonwealth of Virginia. I think that right there is a perfect way to close this program. You have filled 63 minutes, and you've done it effortlessly, just like you did in February. I am truly grateful for your time. Now to November, you grind at UVA, and then what did you say? You're going to take a little bit of a hiatus from school and then focus on the delegate role? Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, so we will get that split between the semesters. I mean, I just feel tremendously fortunate to have this long runway between now and January, because it's giving me a lot of time to sit down with constituents and stakeholders of all stripes and get ducks in a row so that we can make really good use of the legislative session, because once it starts, it goes by quick. We have 8 weeks to govern this Commonwealth in January and February, and so it's on all of us to make sure that we get prepared to do it well.
I thought you, per usual, you crushed it today. Thank you.
Oh, this is so much fun. This is such a great platform that you provide for all of us.
Thank you for coming on the show. Sally Hudson, guys, crushed it. Sally, I think it's great for all of us. And we're going to archive this interview in totality on ilovecville.com. We'll take the audio and we'll turn it into an iTunes podcast. So if you love podcasts like I do, listen to Sally's interview. We'll have that up before close of business today. We'll have the video component archived on ilovecville.com. For the next 30 days after this interview, we'll syndicate the program across the I Love CVille network on 17 Facebook pages, 17 Twitter accounts, the third largest Instagram community in Central Virginia, a daily e-newsletter that reaches 108,000 inboxes, and of course, ilovecville.com and on iTunes. We close the show the same way every single time. We ask everyone that's watching to embody the golden rule. We don't make this about religion. We just make this about treating other people how you want to be treated yourself. Fairly straightforward concept, but certainly missing in a lot of the community. Golden rule. Charlottesville, the Commonwealth, and the country need the golden rule more than ever. Please do it, guys. We're back on the I Love CVille Network in 86 minutes with our animal focus show. We love dogs here, and we have a show on our network every Wednesday at 3 called What's Barking Local, where we spotlight the animal community in a positive capacity. Join us at 3. Enjoy your lunch break, guys. Good work, Sally.
Hey, always a pleasure.
Easy peasy.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Yeah. One more thing. We just got the photo to take for the package. Judah, thank you.